Hi everyone, I'm Ellie Griffin and I am the Mental Health Officer at the English Institute of Sport.
I'm Kaz Naiman. I'm a child and adolescent and sports psychiatrist.
Hi, I'm Mamie Titmus-Morris. I am Performance Lifestyle Coach and Wellbeing Lead with British Gymnastics and Performance Lifestyle Coach with British Triathlon.
I'm Curry. I'm a psychiatrist and a member of the Mental Health Panel at the English Institute of Sport and also on the IOC Mental Health Working Group.
Thank you all for joining me today for this kind of special recording for Eating Disorders Awareness Week, which is a campaign organised each year by BEAT, a UK eating disorder charity. For 2023, BEAT is focusing on busting some of the myths and stereotypes around eating disorders, in particular highlighting the fact that they affect men too. So let's start off with, what do we mean when we talk about an eating disorder?
At its simplest, these are emotional problems which manifest in harmful eating behaviours. We do have those categories and those diagnostic criteria, but athletes don't necessarily fully fit into one or the other. And the most recent criteria have broadened because actually in the past, when our criteria were very restrictive, you could exclude an awful lot of people from treatment. The earlier it's caught, perhaps the less of the sort of stereotypical presentation you will see. And I prefer to think about the beliefs, the thoughts and feelings, the impact, that over-evaluation of shape and weight, that over-focus and rigidity and rules around food, eating and exercise. And athletes don't always show the full picture, so we actually harm our athletes if we don't respond early before you meet the full-blown criteria.
Anorexia nervosa typically is restricting. It isn't always restricting. Sometimes it's over-exercising as a way of being very lean and so lean that you actually have health impacts. But we think beyond health impacts as well. There are other impacts. It impacts on your relationships. It impacts on your day-to-day functioning in your job, your occupation, your leisure pursuits. So we call it a disorder because it has those significant impacts and functional impairments, and it's really about being underweight and finding it difficult to acknowledge that you're underweight, even to the point where you see yourself as being normal weight or overweight when you are underweight. And for me, that's the kind of central feature of a condition like anorexia nervosa. Bulimia nervosa is a condition where people will overeat in an uncontrolled way and binge, sometimes a very large quantity of food very quickly and in a manner that's out of control, and then compensate by some kind of purge. Now, sometimes that's vomiting, sometimes it's laxative, sometimes it's compensatory behaviours like high intensity exercise. So those are the categories that we talk about. But when we talk about categories, it's like you're either in the category or you aren't. It's much more helpful to think about a spectrum.
How can eating disorders impact on mental health?
Eating disorders have the highest mortality rate of any psychiatric illness. And that is both because of the physical effects of an eating disorder, but also there's a very high rate of suicide compared to the general population. In terms of mental health, what happens with those distortions in food and eating, there's a lot more anxiety, there's a lot more depression, there's a lot more obsessionality, and eating disorders are seldom just there about the food. Increasing perfectionism where it gets quite paralyzing, low mood, depression, part of substance misuse. So absolutely looking for the other mental health manifestations will be really important.
What are some of the biggest misconceptions or stereotypes around eating disorders, both generally and particularly within elite sport?
I think there's one that I'll start with, and it's particularly pertinent to Eating Disorders Awareness Week, and that is that it's a women's problem. We know from our research that this is a common problem that affects men as well. In fact, the difference between population levels and levels in elite sport of disordered eating is probably a bigger gap between population levels and sporting levels for men than there is for women. So I think that's a really important misconception. And that's one of the reasons why the Red S framework was developed, moving us away from thinking about the female athlete triad, because it's not a triad, and because it affects men as well as women. So that misconception, this is both sexes and all genders.
I think it's a pretty historic misconception now that it's about attention seeking, and I think we've moved well away from that, and I think rightly so, because sometimes it might be attention seeking, but in the name of needing support and actually a bit of a cry for help, but largely far from that. I think it's not attention seeking in the wild way that people might have considered it previously. There's often, for people that don't feel like there's a choice in what they're doing, those societal norms, I think with those we're looking through our lenses, where actually there's lots of different lenses. Even if you take culturally, what is a culturally accepted body norm for someone, and those are the lenses I think we need to bring more into sport, and actually understanding the story of individuals that we're working with, where they've come from, their history, their background. Yet sexuality is another one. You talk about like gay men, there's been a stereotypical body image associated with that. Well, what does that look like for a male athlete? I think there's all these complexities and things that we haven't spoken about previously, that it's about time that we did start to bring those other lenses in.
How can eating disorders impact elite sport and performance?
The difficulty here is that sometimes in the early stages of disordered eating, there isn't necessarily a performance impact. In fact, some athletes will report for a period of weeks, when they're losing weight, they'll report a performance increase. In the medium and long term, the impact is considerable, and athletes with eating disorders can expect to have shorter careers with inconsistent performances and frequent injuries, as well as all the health impacts that we see with an established eating disorder.
In my experience, it's been rare that an eating disorder sits on its own. There's often a lot that has led to that and a lot that comes off the back of that. So you're never just dealing or working with that one thing. And food is spoken about a lot in performance sport, and just establishing that healthy relationship with food and performance and yourself as a person, beyond just yourself as an athlete, I think is really crucial.
Do you have any advice for those working with elite athletes to help them better support people who are going through or struggling with eating disorders?
For me, it's such a huge privilege to sit in the positions that we do and build the relationships that we do with individuals. It really is. And I think if you're in a position where you've developed the trust, it's on us. We have a responsibility to open up that conversation and open the door. Sometimes by talking about these really hard challenges, you're actually given someone permission to be like, oh, I can say that word, or I can go there and I can talk about that. So I think it's so important. We have such a responsibility to do that. And yeah, just to echo, I think like say it well and say it early, I think has been a lesson that I've learned during my practice. Is it may feel tough in the moment, but it will feel a lot tougher later on if you kind of don't ask that hard question. And yeah, it can unlock the door to some really good work. So yeah, that would be my advice.
We have to keep in mind the physical health as well as the mental health. So it's that one branch where I need to be able to interpret ECGs and blood results and holistically think about the overall health. At the same time, it can be incredibly rewarding when you see people get well and live their best life. So there is that huge intensity of input that's needed. You need a multidisciplinary team who are communicating with each other. It's making sure that the sporting team is linked up with the mental health team. So not to scare people away either. It can be really challenging, but at the same time, really rewarding as well.
How does what an athlete should look like or stereotypically look like potentially affect their body image and self-confidence? And how could that, if at all, potentially lead to disordered eating or issues around eating?
Yeah, hugely. I think we've been in a place previously where, you know, a gymnast has to look this way to win a gold medal. Like that is so wrong. And we are desperately moving away from that and actually celebrating the differences and the strengths that can come in differences with body image. I think the word should is dangerous. I think we see that should, must, that kind of language is dangerous, but we've heard it a lot with sports. Should look a certain way, and it's almost become a bit of a game of like guessing which sports people play based on body image and what they look like and what they wear, and can be hugely impacting on someone's identity.
One of the difficulties here is that there is in most sports a link between weight, shape and performance, but it's a window, and if you're too light or too heavy, then there's a performance impact. So it's finding the window, and it's not lighter is always better or thinner is always better, but there is a link. The second difficulty is that it's entirely natural for athletes, especially junior athletes, to aspire to be the next big thing, and we want to encourage that. People need role models, and people will aspire to be the next Olympic champion, and they'll want to follow the people who have gone before. So the difficulty is accepting that there is a link between weight, shape and performance, and encouraging athletes to aspire to be great, but at the same time acknowledging that we're unique, and that we're all individuals, and that if you try to be someone else in too rigid a way, then you'll try to put a square peg into a round hole, or you'll try to be someone else when really what you should be is the best you, not the best someone else. I think that's the issue for me around role models and body image.
What can someone do to help manage their eating disorder if they think they're struggling?
Often the hardest challenge is accepting that there is a problem at all. So if someone comes forward and is able to acknowledge the problem, then receiving a supportive response when they do that is possibly the most helpful thing. But beyond that, the question that I often ask is, what are you prepared to change? What do you want to work on? And finding some agreement with an athlete about what they want to work on, so they're not feeling too coerced to change something they're not ready to change, but so that there's an acknowledgement that they're willing to change something and move forward and move towards recovery. So the two issues for me are about ensuring that there is a supportive response when someone acknowledges it. And the second thing is finding agreement on what the athlete wants to change and do differently and move on.
I think it's important to ask for help, find someone you trust to support you to ask for help, and to also be as open as you are able to be with those around you so that they can practically support you. Sometimes an athlete will really want to make changes, and those changes can still be incredibly hard, and sometimes just those day-to-day practical supports can make a big difference. So cooking together or eating together or spending time together. But certainly, within our support staff around athletes, it might be the physio who hears about it, it might be the lifestyle advisor, but approaching someone you feel comfortable with, and us making sure that everyone is able to talk about it.
Thank you all for joining us today and for such an interesting and impactful discussion. We'd just like to finish by saying that if you or someone you know is struggling with an eating disorder, then please do reach out for help. There's lots of advice out there and help out there. You can go to your local GP or a variety of charities such as Beat and Mind that have online helplines, chat functions, emails you can contact. So there's a lot of support out there. And it's important to say as well, if you're an athlete, a funded athlete on a world-class programme that gets support through the EIS, you can contact your performance support team to be referred to the mental health team. So there's that support there for you as well. And thanks everyone for listening.